Hello everyone, TJ from Greywall here. Today's little video is going to be about modifying the alternator to give a higher output overall so that you can charge the batteries up quicker, faster, especially if you sat a tick over somewhere. I've got various videos and photos to show you of me doing this process. So let me talk through the mod. What I found is if you go to a website called www.smartgauge.co.uk, you'll find in there's a huge technical page discussing all sorts of things. And if you have a good search through in there, you'll find the modification that I'm doing to my alternator. And the idea here is to fool the alternator into thinking that the starter battery voltage, or at least the batteries that it's looking to charge, the voltage is lower and therefore the battery is flatter than it actually is, so that the alternator ups the voltage, which then in turn increases the exciter voltage and current it's putting through the rotor, and therefore the overall current that the voltage and the current that the alternator puts out. So that when you sat at tick over, instead of putting out, I don't know, 15 or 20 amps, it'll put out 50, 60, 70 amps. And I'm going to do the mod. So in a moment, I'm going to click over to a video of me showing you the regulator that I've taken off my Bosch alternator and modifying the main regulator input voltage, which it takes from the plus B pole, which is the output actually, to the battery. And I'll show you how I do that in a mo. But the main thing that I wanted to say here in the intro is that when I had a look on YouTube and I had a look through all the manuals, everybody talks about the fact on the 3-litre Iveco especially, the alternator is buried at the back end of the engine behind drive shafts and exhausts. And you have to strip the driver's side wheel off. You have to take a plastic cover off at the bottom of the inner wing. And you have to remove things like exhaust pipes, all sorts of things, including the belt, which would, in my case, would involve removing the air conditioning compressor, an idler pulley, and it's very protracted, and that getting an alternator off this van is really bad. But what I did was I decided to go and have a look. So I've got hydraulic self-leveling on this vehicle, so I simply jacked it up, put in some prop stands, crawled underneath, found the alternator and realized actually I didn't need to take the alternator off. All I had to do was to take off the B+, the big thick cable that feeds down to the battery, and insulate it, take off the 2-pin plug, which has D+ amongst other things in there, off, and then undo all the screws and bolts and take the regulator straight off the back of the alternator and leave the alternator in place. I thought, all right, I can do that, and I did. So the first video I'll show you is I've actually got the regulator and the brushes, the brush pack off, and it's sat on a bench, and I'll show you what I've done to that. And then I'll show you a video of me crawling underneath the van to actually show you the alternator in place and the cabling that I've now fitted to run up to the top bulkhead so that I can put a switch in and use the diode packs that is described in the following. And the beauty is that it's such a simple, cheap mod. I bought 10 diodes for something like £2 or £3. I used a bit of 20 amp mains cabling, double insulated, which I ran up to the top of the bulkhead, and I bought some specialist square plastic fuse holders, took the fuse out, and it left the perfect sort of size space available to put the diodes in. Now, what you may not know is that a diode drops voltage across it. So if I run the sensing cable through a diode, you lose about 0.55, 0.6 volts. So I put 2 packs in there to drop around a volt and a bit, and it does exactly that. So I'll show you what I did and where I've put it all now, and I'll let you see first of all, I'll let you see the circuit diagram of what I'm doing, what I'm aiming to do first. Okay, I've drawn a little image showing the alternator at the bottom. On the left of this screen is how the Bosch alternator actually comes. There is a brass and copper tag that comes out of the regulator, and as you can see from the shape I've drawn down here on the bottom left hand corner, and then it wraps round and pops onto the B+. What you have to do is to lift that tab up. You take all the plastics off the back, lifted up, and then I cut off the circular bit to form a new brass connector or tab that will then allow you to put a spade end onto it and then run the wiring up. And if you look to the right, the second circle, I've done this, and then I just literally run 2 cables up to the bulkhead, and I've made up 2 diode packs. You have a diode pointing each way because you're only after the voltage drop. You don't want to stop any of the current going through. I bought some 10 amp diodes. They were cheap, you know, they're about £3 for 10 or 20 of them off eBay or Amazon. Put a loop in, put 2 tabs in. So I've run a cable up from the regulator through one of the diode packs, looped over the top and back through the second one, and then took the cable back down to the B+. Okay, that's the mod. That's all there is. That drops 1.1 volts that the regulator sees, so it ups the voltage to around 16 volt output at the B+, with a lot more current. And then, as you can see, I've also run off from the bottom of the diode packs another cable off to a defeat switch, which I have mounted inside on my dashboard, which you will see. And that simply removes the diode packs so that the regulator clicks back to being a normal Bosch regulator running at about 14.4 volts. Very easy to do. I'm aiming to put a 3-way switch in later, but please, you know, it doesn't get much easier than this. Yeah, so here is the regulator, and what I've done is I've twisted up. There was like a circular piece here that connects to the B+ terminal, which is how it is gauging what voltage it's seeing and therefore what to use. So I've bent this up out the way because I'm going to run this tag with a cable from the B+, which is actually on here. This slots underneath here like that. Can you see what I've done? Yeah, so I'm going to take a cable from the B+ here and another cable up from what this is actually the rectifier sense input effectively. I'm going to take a cable up to the top, and then on the bulkhead where I can get at it easily with the engine cover open, I'm going to wire in some diodes to lower the voltage that the rectifier is seeing so that it increases the voltage and the current to the batteries because it thinks the battery's flat. And as you can tell on this, it's a Bosch uprated alternator. This is a 140 amp alternator, and I want it to output probably, if I can, 40, 50, 60 amps at tick over. And I'm going to put a switch in as well that will defeat the diodes and let the rectifier and this alternator actually see the correct voltage, so that once I've got the absorption charge of around 15 volts or so into the batteries, yeah, I can then click it down when I'm traveling to 14.4 and let it charge the rest of the time. So I'm uprating the alternator without shedding out, you know, more than a couple of quid. I'll show you what I do later once I've got it all back together. Can you see how the vehicle is, you know, it's right off the ground with the hydraulics. I've prop standed it obviously to make sure it's safe, and I'll take you underneath and show the alternator and show you the mod that I'm doing. Let's have a look, see if I can get underneath. Oh. So there is the alternator, you can see it there. You can see the cabling that I've done. I've effectively changing the bias voltage that the regulator is picking up from the B+, and I'm taking a cable up to the top to where I'm going to install some diodes. So I've done most of the work underneath here, as you can see. Okay, and shortly I'll take a headlamp out and show you where I'm putting the diodes to. What I find fascinating is you can actually take the regulator and everything off the back here without having to disturb the alternator's, you know, fixings or even belt tension or anything. Quite clever, really. So there you go. Let me carry on and show you the rest of it too. Okay, so yes, what I've done is taken a video of me stripping the driver's side headlamp out, so that you can see the rear of the bulkhead, because that's where I've put the diode packs. Because they're warm, dry and out of the way, but still getting plenty of cool air through. So I've just whipped off the 2 little plastic covers and I'm undoing the headlamp now. I've sped this video up just so you can see what you have to do. There's 3 screws to take the little plastic panels out, and then 3 10mm bolts effectively, or set screws, that you take out, and you undo a plug at the back of the headlamp, and the headlamp's away in your hand and you can put it down somewhere. And now You can get right behind at everything, actually. I will say that the Ducato is pretty good for this sort of thing. Okay, yeah, so I've opened up the fuse blocks that I'm using, and you can now see, if I can get a zoom in, I was having difficulty actually. You can see there are 2 sets of diode packs inside, and the cabling's running through a bulkhead to a switch that I've fitted in the dashboard. It's all fairly simple stuff. I've soldered all the electrics, taped up where I needed to. Okay, so I've come inside and you can see where I fitted the switch. I've run the cable through the bulkhead, attached a switch to be able to delete it all. Very simple and straightforward. Okay, so in conclusion, I just wanted to say, it works fantastically. If I fire up at tick over and get her running, especially on a cold night when the batteries are flat, she outputs 16.1 volts at the alternator terminal. However, there's a thick wire from there goes down to the starter motor, where there's a joint and a thread, and then there's another thick cable goes up to the starter battery, which is in the floor of the cab. The voltage at the starter battery is around about 15.8, 15.9. And then when it comes through another thick cable from the positive on that battery through the split relay and to the rear habitation batteries, which are under this floor here, it's down to about 15.7, 15.8 volts. However, the current that's coming through is anything up to around, if I'm at 50% depletion on my habitation batteries, then it puts through about 70 amp, sometimes even as high as 80 or 90 amp if it's really cold outside, because the regulator is monitoring its own temperature and monitoring the temperature within the alternator. And if it's colder, it can push harder for a while. It takes about quarter an hour, 20 minutes for the alternator to start to warm up. By the end of an hour and a half, when I'm nearly charged up, everything's backed off and it's down to about 10 or 15 amp. But that's fine, because within an hour and a half, I've charged from 50% to around about 95 or even 100%. So it's working beautifully. And if I do a trip out and I leave the switch in the cab set so it's pushing maximum voltage, and I'm driving along for 20 minutes, half an hour, it'll charge the batteries up really well. So I'm very pleased with the modification, and I would suggest that you go to the Smart Gauge site and have a look yourself and see what you think. And if it's possible, I'd have a go. Honest, it's great. Okay, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe.